as the last year or two, I'm finding myself scratching my head on stuff like that. If you're going to bring that Punk back, at very least, tease it. You won't believe he's going to be back here next week, 2 weeks from now. Oh my God. Yeah, trust me, your jaw's going to drop when you see this person back. Everybody would guess and whatever. But you'd make some kind of fanfare about it. You wouldn't just say, oh, here on this little show that almost nobody watches, here's this guy named CM Punk back. Just grossly mishandled. So AEW drops the ball by not, signing the guy, and then WWE brings him back in such an inauspicious way that you have to wonder if that's not Vince going, welcome back, CM. It's because it just seems odd the way it was handled.
Supposedly, with this setup, who knows, he could come back like for a Saudi Arabia show if they want to throw the millions of dollars at him, like we've seen.
Could be.
But you mentioned TNA and your booking mind. What exactly was your job in TNA? Were you on the booking committee or?
Yeah, I was on the booking committee. Not an effective voice on the booking committee though. It was in hindsight. It was sort of like a rudderless ship. We'd get into the production meeting, and I remember one time in specifically, AJ Styles was wrestling. I forget who he was wrestling, but the question was who'd go to the ring first, AJ or the heel. And Terry Taylor, raised his hand. Terry and I always sat right next to each other. We'd play tic-tac-toe on the paper on the desk, and Terry said, well, why don't we send the heel out first to get some heat and then, hit AJ's music and get a good pop out of it. And Jeff Jarrett looked at the paper like he was pondering, and he goes, no, we'll keep it as it is. And then he said something to tell you the exact words. I'm paraphrasing. I can't remember the exact words, but it was not far from this. No, we're going to keep it like it is. And from now on, why don't you keep your stupid fucking ideas to yourself, Terry. And I remember kicking Terry to the table like, dude, you can't let a man talk to you like that. I don't care if it's your job or not. Like, do something, say something. And so because after that, I thought I wouldn't speak up, because I thought if he says that to me, I'm probably not liable to take it as laid back as Terry did. And it didn't matter anyway. Dixie would come to you every, I'm sure there was a week or two she missed here or there, but it seemed like every time you saw her, she would have a question for you about the business. What do you think about this segment? And I would look at it and I'd run it through, like knowing where that particular angle had been, where they're planning on it going, and then I'd give my 2 cents and I'd explain the psychology of it. So if you do this, then this is how it's going to be. The fans are going to react to it and see. And I'd explain it out to her. Not one time did she ever take my advice. And not just mine, nobody's. But then 2 weeks later, we'd come back for the next taping, and she would say, you're right, everybody's bitching about it online. And everybody online would be 25 people that were talking about it on some blog site somewhere. So you'd give her that, advice, which she wouldn't take. And it was just, like I said, a rudderless ship when you have people that are, you had Terry Taylor, you had Dutch Mantel, you had Vince Russo, you had Jeff Jarrett, you had me, you had, God, who else was there? Through the years, you had
Al Snow at one
Al
point.
Snow, Mick Foley, Terry Funk. Nobody's advice being taken. And, so you just go to the point where it doesn't matter why say anything anyway, because nobody's going to listen to you anyway. But my title in TNA was Head of Talent Relations. And, my job hands-on with the wrestlers was mostly to work with them. The one thing I primarily focused on was promos. Taking the guys up and I'd say, okay, Hannibal, you're going to be wrestling AJ Styles in the main event of the next pay-per-view, and this is where we give me 90 seconds, go. And, we'd film it and watch it back, and, I'd give, give pointers. Here's the strengths, here's the weaknesses, these are the things you need to improve upon. As head of talent relations, my job was pretty much to play liaison between if your contract was coming up or we were trying to get you signed to a contract. Where does things stand? What can I do to prod you along? What can I do to try to pull the company? Although my job was supposedly to advocate for the company, I was also trying to find that place. Like if I knew that, hey, they'll sign you for this and you want this much, hey, go in and ask for this, you'll be fine. Because to me, I didn't see the need for creating animosity. You know, if we sit there and go back and forth for 3, 4, 5, 6 months, now you got a chip on your shoulder. You don't think the place really wants you. And, you know, I'd always seen it from the boys' point of view, but also I've seen it from the company point of view. Anybody that's ever done this side of it knows that this is anything in entertainment is incredibly expensive. You know, setting up even an office, the computers, the rent, the insurance, the phone lines, the people to staff it, everything gets exponentially expensive. And the wrestlers oftentimes don't understand that part of it. You know, we're sort of spoiled. We show up in a building, we get flown in. Worst we have to do is maybe rent a car. We get to the building, the ring's set up, the people come in and we wrestle and we leave, right? We don't see any of the other stuff that goes on. So I always try to find that happy medium between the two. What's going to make the wrestlers feel most comfortable and ready to go out there and work, and what's going to make the company feel best about hiring, say, a Hannibal or a Shane Douglas. So that's why I did his talent relations. How I got that job, I never asked for it. When Dusty Rhodes came in, he held a team meeting one day, and he was going through, and I was standing over to the side looking at my match that I was agenting that night. And he said, "Where's Shane Douglas?" And I walked out. He goes, "Shane Douglas is the new head of talent relations, so anybody that's in the contract negotiations, talk with Shane." And I didn't know if he was ribbing me or not. And that's how I ended up getting the job. So I owe Dusty a big, aside from the stuff I learned from him over the years, I also got that first real office position from Dusty Rhodes.
How were your dealings with AJ Styles there?
I love working with AJ. AJ, it sounds like a pun, right? Phenomenal in ring, really is. A kid that can do anything. But just as a person, especially when the stories I just said a few minutes ago about the WWF, right? And you start to get familiar with that kind of stuff, and then you meet a guy like AJ, who's just a sweetheart guy, just a really good human being. You go to him anytime you had a concern. All you had to do is go to him and bring it up, and it was no problem. If everybody was that easy to work with, this would be the greatest job in the world, being involved in the office. Unfortunately, he's the exception to the rule.
Yeah, and even as an independent promoter, I can tell you that's like you deal with more assholes than friendly people in wrestling.
Yeah.
Somebody asked me the other day, "Why are you dealing with this dickhead?" And I'm like, everybody's a dickhead. It's just a matter of what level of a dickhead they are.
Well, and to that end too, like I was talking to one of my friends that's not in the business, and they were asking me, "Why is everybody like that?" And I said, "Well, if you look at it from the wrestler's point of view, they've gotten lied to and stepped on and stabbed in the back 10 million times. And I think people like Vince engender that. They want it to be that way. So that, when you get a little bit of something thrown at you, you're appreciative of it. And, it's like throwing, you have a room full of starving people, right? You throw a pizza in the middle and watch everybody fight over the pizza. I think that's what guys like Vince McMahon do, is they want to engender that so that you're fighting amongst each other instead of coming to me and asking me for a raise.
And I'm going to ask you some fan questions. There's some fans even at this hour on here watching this. Do you feel that Triple H has taken elements of his promo style from you?
We all steal from each other. But I one time, and this is years ago, I was still married at the time, and we were watching Raw, and I had gone into the kitchen to make a sandwich, and I was like half listening but not really paying attention, and I heard something. I stopped and I went, "Why does that sound familiar?" And I walked in around the corner. I'm looking at the TV, and I walk in on him saying, "It's my belt, it's my belt, it's my damn belt." That's why it sounds familiar. It's my promo verbatim, word for word. And so yeah, I mean, he's obviously taking stuff, but again, we all steal from each other. It's the franchise character, as much as I'd love to say I created that in my mind and it's all my doing, it's Barry Windham, it's Brad Armstrong, it's Ric Flair, it's Ricky Steamboat, and Terry Funk, with a little bit of like Bruno and Dominic thrown into a blender, with a whole lot of Troy Martin thrown in there. So instead of stealing, I'd say probably more homage, because again, we all take from each other. And there's like Scott Irwin told me long time ago, don't try to do anything original because it's all been done. So If you know, I've taken parts of my promo style from Ric Flair and other people, and you know, I'm sure he's borrowed as well. But I've never taken anybody's verbatim.
Have you ever worked with Owen Hart, and if so, is he the sweetheart everyone says he is? Some fan is asking.
Yeah, I never worked with Owen. Never got the chance. Was never that lucky. Owen was one of those guys, like I talked about Chris Candido, that it just came easy to him. You know, at least he made it look easy. But Owen was one of those guys that had such a sense of humor. You know, that he'd be saying something, you'd be thinking it's just a conversation, and meanwhile he's hitting you with a zinger. One time we were in Germany, he was wrestling Davey Boy Smith. I think it was Germany. Anyway, he flying nared Davey Boy and puts him in a headlock, and you know, from the back all you could see is, like, you know, without my glass I could just see like certain generalities. And I see him taking down, he goes like that to Davey Boy. Davey Boy starts spitting, you know, does it again, and this goes on 4, 5, 6 times. And what the hell is he doing out there? He's like, he keeps wiping his hand across his face. What the hell is he doing? Davey Boy comes back and he's got this beard of shit all over his face. There's coffee grounds and bananas and like grounded bananas and God knows whatever else was there. And I'm feeling, well, you know, he had it somewhere in his tights, and when he built it, he just kept wiping different shit on Davey Boy's face. He was funny. He was one of those guys that, you know, you had to really pay attention. When we were in Germany, I've talked the story before about Scott Hall and Kevin complaining for the entire ride about the kind of beer that was on the bus. And after about an hour or two of it, it was like a 6-hour drive, I couldn't take it anymore. I was afraid to like scream, just shut up about the beer already. And I walked down, and Owen's sitting there, you know, watching the TV, and I sat down next to him and was going, man, what the fuck? I'm just talking to him, right? And he keeps on going, you know, making different motions back and forth. And I finally asked him a question. He doesn't say anything. I said, you know, I asked him again, is he sleeping? I look over, he's still watching. You know, finally looks at me and he goes, you know, he had earphones in, and he, you know, the little ones pushed back in. And I was asking, like, how the hell do you put up with that shit? These guys aren't driving you crazy. They're bitching like 2 ladies, like old ladies in the back there about the beer. And he pulled the earplugs out. I went, oh, that's how he's not paying any attention to them, you know. But Owen was, yeah, he's a great guy. I never got the pleasure to work with him, though.
Someone's asking you your favorite memory of the Dynamic Dudes.
Signing the contract. That was the first contract that I'd ever signed. And, you know, Johnny and I, like I've often said, it wasn't the greatest gimmick of my career. I learned a lot. I learned about tagging basics with Johnny. And, you know, also being pushed up the card a little bit. Instead of being the guy throwing the card somewhere, you know, we were suddenly a stock that they were trying to push. So there was a lot to be learned about, you know, from those positions. The thing that stands out the most about with Johnny was, A, we got along great. Traveling together on the road was, you know, it was great. We got along very well. But we had debuted on Music City Showdown, I think it was called, the one where Terry Funk pal drove Flair through the table. We wrestled the Samoan SWAT team with Paulie Dangerously as their manager. And it was, to this day I can't remember which, I've been too lazy to look up the name. It was Johnny and Shane, the next generation, or Johnny and Shane, the new generation. Next or new. And the next morning we get on the shuttle to go to the airport, and Eddie Gilbert, who had a very wry sense of humor, gets in and he sits down and he said, well, did you guys hear your new name? Well, in my head I'm thinking, well, we've already aired on the pay-per-view last night as Johnny and Shane, the next or new generation. I said, okay, I'll bite. What's the punchline, Eddie? He goes, you're going to be called the Dynamic Dudes. And me and Johnny both started laughing, and Eddie did one of these. And I could tell I knew Eddie well enough at that point that he was being serious. I said, please tell me you're fucking ribbon. He went, and I said, where did that come from? He said, Jim Hurd, the Pizza Hut executive, in his infinite wisdom of professional wrestling, had commissioned a study in California, with the thought being everything starts in California and works eastward. what were the big words that year in California? And the two words that topped the list was dynamic and dude. Like, hey, dude, that's dynamic. And so he put the number 1 and 2 together and came up with the dynamic dudes, and the rest, as they say, is infamy. With this town, Philadelphia, me and Johnny, when flying in there, I used to get like knots in my stomach because they were not the biggest babyface town. They didn't like Johnny and Shane too much.
What are your feelings on Paul Heyman today? I know he probably still owes you a lot of money, even though he's a multimillionaire. He's probably not going to ever pay you back.
He owes a lot of people a lot of money. Look, with Paul, like everything is a yin and yang, right? Paul saw something in me that I didn't see even at the time. At that point in my career, 11 years in, I knew that I was a good, solid baby face. Just come off the run with Ricky Steamboat. But Paul had seen something in me. I can't credit Paul with the heel stuff. Eddie Gilbert had come up with that idea long before Eddie had seen the heel turn. He wanted to turn me and Johnny heels as the dudes. So he had seen, I credit Eddie with that first. But Eddie's idea was, Eddie was a little bit too rooted in Memphis. So he saw me as the fabulous one, like the Fargos, the fabulous one, Shane Douglas. And that's a pretty hard thing, even now, like in hindsight, looking back, it's a hard thing to like direct your focus into. Excuse me, when Eddie left, abruptly, just left and never came back, and Todd put Paul Heyman in charge. He came to me in 1993 was the first year the NFL started signifying one player per team as the franchise player. Supposedly the most important player to that team. Paul came to me and said, I've got an idea I want to run by you. I was thinking of calling you the franchise. And he explained the NFL connection and everything. And, so I started thinking about it, and I said, what do you see this character, how do you see it playing out? And he said, well, like he knew Lawrence Taylor, and I knew Mario Lemieux and Dan Marino, and, between the two of us, we could either get to or make connection to a lot of different athletes. He wanted me to go to the ring each night wearing like a Lawrence Taylor jersey, a Mario Lemieux jersey, a Michael Jordan jersey, whatever, signifying that I'm such a franchise athlete that I hobnob with these guys. And I thought about it for a few minutes, and I said, well, wouldn't the franchise expect Michael Jordan and Lemieux and Lawrence Taylor to wear his jersey? And Paul stopped and thought about it, and he went, you get the character. So I give Paul the credit and seeing something in me that I didn't see and didn't have the confidence in myself to carry out. That would be the yin, and the yang side of that would be he owes me a lot of money. So, you get the good with the bad, but that's pretty much how life is. I mean, that's, if I still worried about the money that I was owed all those years ago, I'd probably have a heart attack by now. It's, but hey, Paul, if you're owed, it's $144,000.
Favorite order at the Penrose Diner? Is that something that I don't know about?
Penrose Diner, yeah, that's the Penrose Diner is down by the old, no, I didn't eat much diners. I went in there to the Penrose and I got spaghetti and meatballs one time, and the meatballs came loaded up with big chunks of onions and stuff. My mom never put onions in my meatballs, so I've never been a big Penrose Diner guy.
And the last fan question I'll ask, there's a lot of them on here, surprisingly, even at this time, is what are your thoughts on John Cena?
I've often said John is I guess the Hulk Hogan of his day, right? A huge draw. I'll speak about like his character stuff and the other stuff as to why I really respect the guy. I can separate, there's the wrestling side of things in our business, then there's the human side of things, the way I see it. I don't think John is ever going to go down as being one of the, you're never going to hear his name thrown around with the Ricky Steamboats and the Ric Flairs of the world, or the Terry Funks. But when I say the Hulk Hogan of the generation, that's not a condescending comment. He is one of the bigger names, if not the biggest name of his generation up to a point, right, until you had the others getting hot, like with The Rock and stuff, but they all came in together. But when you see a guy and this is what always impressed me about Hogan, was you know, when you're in that level, time is very, very valuable. And, you know, they'd come down and they'd have a room full of handicapped kids there to see the Hulkster. And they'd always have a handler with them. And, you know, Terry would go around and meet each kid and everything. Within 10 or 15 minutes, the handler would say, okay, kids, Mr. Hogan has to get ready for his match tonight. And if he wasn't done, he would say, I'm not done yet. And then he'd go around, but he made every single kid in that room feel special. Like I remember one night he walked over to a kid and he goes, hey man, I got a big match tonight. Can I get some of that energy from me, bro? Can I rub your arms? And like, dude, you could just see these kids just like blossom like a flower in sunlight. And I thought that is pretty fucking cool. You know, that somebody at this stature has an easy out, the handler can get him right out of here. And instead he's making each one of those kids. My understanding is that Cena does the same kind of stuff. And you see like he just gave $500,000 to the firefighters out in California. For somebody that puts their money where their mouth is, to me that's a double thumbs up, cool, and kudos to him for it. And you know, I'm happy to see him making the transition into movies. So he's segueing out of his wrestling career, much like Dwayne did. So anybody that has the time to do that and put their money where their mouth is gets double thumbs up from me.
And you're one of the all-time greats. Is there any favorite match of yours that stands out?
Like just in general, or of my career?
Of your career.